She leaned closer, her voice a breath against my ear. "This room is off the record." In that instant, I knew nothing about this night would be ordinary. The story begins with the young man's arrival at the hotel, a place that feels a little too quiet, too polished, as if it hides stories in its walls. He notices the subtle hum of the lobby, the faint clink of glasses from the bar, the distant shuffle of luggage wheels, but all of that fades when his eyes fall on her, the hotel manager. She isn't the kind of woman who demands attention through loudness. Instead, her presence is a quiet gravity. The way she moves, measured, graceful, with a kind of practiced calm, suggests someone who has long learned to balance authority with warmth. Her dark hair, neatly tied back yet softened by a few loose strands, frames a face touched lightly by time in a way that only deepens her beauty. When she speaks, her voice is low, steady, and almost intimate, though they've only just met. She calls him by his name, which startles him because it feels personal, almost as if she's been expecting him. There's an undercurrent of recognition he can't quite place. As she hands him the key card, her fingers brush against his. The contact is so brief it might have been an accident, but he feels it as a spark, an unnecessary detail for a professional exchange, and yet, it lingers. He notices the way her eyes hold his just a second too long before she looks away. Internally, he's unsettled. She's older, clearly experienced, assured, carrying herself with the kind of confidence that makes people take her seriously. And yet there's something vulnerable beneath the surface, a trace of weariness behind her poised smile. He wonders what it would be like to know that part of her, the unguarded side. She doesn't just tell him his room number, she leans slightly closer, lowering her voice so only he can hear, "This room is off the record." The words land with weight. They're ambiguous, secretive, almost conspiratorial. He doesn't know what she means, whether it's hotel policy, a personal favor, or something else entirely. What he does know is that the air between them has shifted. The sensory world sharpens in that moment, the faint scent of her perfume, subtle, floral, not sweet but grounded, the warmth of her nearness, the way her eyes flick to his lips before retreating to his gaze again. He feels as if the bustling lobby has disappeared, leaving only the two of them standing there with an unspoken question hanging between them. The keynote closes with him walking toward the elevator, key card in hand, his chest heavy with curiosity and an inexplicable pull toward her. The night feels open, undefined, and he knows that whatever waits in that room isn't just a place to sleep, it's the start of something he doesn't yet understand. The hallway feels strangely hushed as he walks toward the door marked with his number. Hotels usually carry a certain impersonality, the muted carpet, the dim lights, the sound of distant doors shutting, but tonight it feels different. As though he has been ushered into a space meant not just for rest, but for something unspoken. Sliding the key card, he steps inside. The room is warm, more luxurious than expected. There's a bottle of wine waiting on the desk, 2 glasses instead of 1. The curtains are half drawn, letting in the glow of the city lights outside, shimmering faintly against the polished floor. He can't shake the thought, this doesn't feel accidental. As he sets down his bag, there's a soft knock. His pulse jumps. When he opens the door, it's her. The hotel manager, still composed, though up close her eyes seem gentler, less guarded. She doesn't step inside right away, instead, she lingers at the threshold, as though silently asking for permission. When he nods, she enters, carrying herself with quiet elegance. The room seems to shrink when she's in it. She glances around, almost as though ensuring everything is as it should be. Then her gaze returns to him, steady but softened by something he can't name. "I wanted to make sure you were comfortable," she says, though the words feel like a thin veil over something deeper. There's a pause, long enough for him to notice details he hadn't before. The faint lines near her eyes, which deepen when she smiles, the delicate silver band on her finger, not a wedding ring but something older, more personal, the way she tucks a stray lock of hair behind her ear, revealing the curve of her neck. These details imprint themselves on him, small and devastating. When she moves toward the table, her hand brushes against his arm. It's light, almost accidental, but it burns through him in a way he can't ignore. She pours the wine slowly, her movements unhurried, as if she has all the time in the world. The sound of liquid filling the glass is strangely intimate in the silence. As she hands him a glass, their fingers touch again. This time, neither pulls away immediately. The contact lingers just long enough to thicken the air between them. His chest tightens, not with lust, but with a deep, aching curiosity, a pull toward the unknown layers of this woman standing so close. The keynote ends with them sitting across from each other at the small table, the city light painting her profile in silver. Their conversation hasn't truly begun, yet the silence already carries the weight of everything they're both afraid to name. The first sip of wine feels heavier than it should. He can taste the richness of it, but more than that, he feels the closeness of her presence across the table. The lamp between them casts a soft circle of light, leaving the edges of the room in shadow, as though the world outside no longer matters. She doesn't rush into small talk. Instead, she studies him quietly, as if weighing whether he's someone who can hold a truth without breaking it. When she finally speaks, her tone is low, thoughtful. She asks him where he's from, what brought him here, not like a hotel manager checking boxes, but like a woman who wants to hear the answers. He tells her fragments, the city he left behind, the uncertain reasons he chose this trip, how he's still trying to figure out what he wants out of life. His words come haltingly, but she listens without interruption, her eyes steady on his. That gaze feels like a hand resting lightly against his chest, grounding, intimate, impossible to ignore. Then she offers her own fragments. She talks about the hotel, how it has been her world for years. There's pride in her voice when she speaks of it, but also a quiet fatigue. She mentions nights when the building feels emptier than the rooms suggest, when the silence presses too heavily. And though she doesn't say it outright, he hears the loneliness tucked between her words. Her vulnerability stirs something in him. He notices how her fingers trace the rim of her glass, slow and deliberate, as though she needs the anchor. Without thinking, he reaches across the table, letting his hand brush against hers. It isn't bold, just the lightest contact, but when her eyes flick up to his, there's no mistaking the shift in the air. She doesn't pull away. Their conversation turns softer, deeper. They laugh quietly at small things, the sound breaking through the tension only to deepen it afterward. At times, silence stretches between them, but it never feels empty. Instead, it's charged, filled with the quiet ache of two people who know they've stepped into something neither expected. As the wine dwindles, so does the formality. She leans back, tilting her head slightly as she studies him, and he notices the way her hair loosens around her face. The space between them feels fragile, precious, as though one wrong move could shatter it. The keynote closes with him daring to imagine reaching for her hand fully this time, wondering if she would let him. His chest tightens at the thought, and though he doesn't act yet, the weight of desire, gentle, restrained, yet undeniable, settles firmly between them. The wine has softened the edges of the evening, but it's not the drink that has his pulse steady and uneven, it's her. Sitting across from him, her posture has eased, her shoulders less guarded, as if the roles of guest and manager have dissolved into something far more human. She leans forward slightly, resting her elbow on the table, her hand cradling her cheek. The light catches the delicate lines at the corner of her eyes, not as flaws but as proof of the life she's lived. He finds himself staring, not at the glamour she presents to the world, but at the details, the small sigh in her breath, the way she tilts her head when she listens, the faint trace of sadness beneath her composed expression. Their conversation slows, not because they've run out of things to say, but because silence has become comfortable between them. Every pause seems to pull them closer. He lets his hand drift near hers on the table. This time, when their fingers touch, she doesn't move away. Instead, her thumb brushes lightly against the back of his hand, hesitant, testing, but the gesture sends a rush of warmth through him. The closeness feels fragile, as though both of them are walking a line between restraint and surrender. She breaks the stillness with a quiet laugh, almost shy, and he realizes he's seeing a side of her that few likely do, the unguarded woman beneath the polished exterior. The sound of her laughter lingers in the air, soft and disarming. After a moment, she rises and walks toward the window, parting the curtains slightly. The city lights spill into the room, shimmering across her silhouette. He joins her, drawn by a pull he can't resist. Standing side by side, the space between them is measured only in breaths. He feels the faint warmth of her shoulder brushing against his arm. She turns her head toward him, and for a suspended moment their eyes meet, closer than before. There's no pretense left, just quiet recognition. His instinct is to lean in, but something in her gaze holds him still, reminding him that the beauty of this moment is in its patience, not its rush. Instead, he lets his hand rest lightly at the small of her back. The touch is careful, respectful, but it carries the weight of everything unspoken. She doesn't move away, in fact, she exhales softly, as if relieved he dared. The room seems to shrink around them, the world narrowing to nothing more than the warmth of her body beside his. The keynote ends with her whispering, almost to herself, "This shouldn't feel so easy." The words linger, fragile and trembling with possibility, leaving him caught between restraint and the undeniable pull of her presence. The quiet between them grows heavier, no longer just silence but something fragile, teetering between longing and hesitation. Her words, "This shouldn't feel so easy," linger like smoke in the air. He watches the way her eyes shift toward the floor, the confidence of a manager slipping to reveal a woman who suddenly seems uncertain of herself. He wants to say something to steady her, but all that comes out is her name, soft, reverent, as if speaking it alone carries meaning. At the sound, she looks back at him, her lips parting as though she might speak, then closing again. Finally, she exhales, turning slightly so her shoulder rests against the wall near the window. The city lights trace her profile, and in the half-glow he can see both the strength and the vulnerability etched there. "I don't let people this close," she admits. Her voice is low, almost apologetic. "Not anymore." The words strike him deeper than he expects. He senses the weight behind them, years of holding herself together, years of being the reliable figure in a world that asks her to never falter. In that moment, she isn't the hotel manager, she's a woman carrying the ache of solitude. He steps closer, careful not to crowd her. His hand finds hers again, this time without hesitation. He doesn't squeeze tightly, just lets their fingers fold together, a gesture that says he isn't asking anything of her except the truth of this moment. She doesn't pull away. Instead, she lets her thumb rest against his, her touch trembling ever so slightly. "You're too young to be caught in someone else's shadows," she says, the words tinged with both warning and care. He shakes his head gently, meeting her eyes. "I'm not here by accident." His voice is steady, though his heart hammers in his chest. The vulnerability between them sharpens into something undeniable. She looks at him as though searching for a reason to step back, yet finding none. Her free hand lifts slightly, brushing against his sleeve, then lingering on his forearm. The touch is light, tentative, but it carries the gravity of someone testing whether she can allow herself to want again. The world feels impossibly small in that moment, the muted hum of the city below, the faint rustle of curtains in the air conditioning, the heat of her hand against his skin. Everything else falls away. The keynote closes with her whispering, barely audible, "I don't know if I'm strong enough to stop this." Her words tremble with both fear and desire, leaving him standing inches away, knowing the decision no longer rests on him alone. Her whisper, "I don't know if I'm strong enough to stop this," hangs between them like a confession neither expected to voice aloud. For a moment, the room feels weightless, suspended, as though time itself is waiting for their choice. He stands close enough to feel the faint warmth radiating from her, the subtle rhythm of her breathing. His chest aches with the pull to close the gap, but he doesn't move too quickly. Instead, he studies her face, the flicker of conflict in her eyes, the way her lips part as though words might follow but never come. His hand, still entwined with hers, tightens slightly, not in possession but in reassurance. He wants her to know he isn't asking for anything more than what she's willing to give. The silence is thick, yet tender, and in that silence, he feels her fingers slowly curl more firmly around his. She turns her head toward the window, as if needing the city lights to ground her. Her voice is soft, but steadier now. People talk. They always do. The faintest smile touches her lips, brittle and self-protective, though her hand refuses to let go of his. He steps closer, until their shoulders brush, until he can smell the faint trace of her perfume, something floral with an earthy undertone that seems to belong only to her. Then let them, he murmurs, not as defiance, but as truth. Her eyes lift back to his, and in them he sees the struggle, years of practiced restraint, colliding with the rawness of wanting. Slowly, almost against her own permission, her free hand rises and touches his chest. Her palm rests there lightly, over his heartbeat, testing the solidity of him. The warmth of her hand seeps through fabric and skin, anchoring him in a way that leaves him breathless. For a suspended instant, the room narrows to just that touch, the weight of her palm, the closeness of her breath, the unspoken surrender trembling on the edge. He dares to lift his hand to her cheek, brushing away a strand of hair that's fallen loose. His thumb grazes her skin, and her eyes flutter closed briefly, as though even that simple touch unravels her. When she opens them again, her gaze holds his steady. The distance between them is almost gone. The air vibrates with the ache of what's about to happen, of what they both want but fear to claim. The keynote closes with her whispering, barely audible, "If you cross this line, there's no turning back." Her words are equal parts warning and invitation, leaving him trembling on the edge of choice. Her words, "If you cross this line, there's no turning back," linger in the quiet, trembling between fear and desire. He doesn't answer with promises or declarations. Instead, he lets the truth speak through his stillness, through the steadiness of his gaze, through the gentle way his thumb traces her cheek as though she is something precious. And then, she leans forward. Not with boldness, not with certainty, but with the cautious surrender of someone who hasn't allowed herself to be vulnerable in a very long time. Their foreheads touch first, a quiet, lingering press that says more than words could. Her breath mingles with his, warm and uneven, carrying the weight of all she's held back. When their lips finally meet, it isn't a rush, it's a question answered softly, a tentative brush that deepens only when she doesn't pull away. Her hand tightens against his chest, clutching his shirt as though anchoring herself in this choice. For him, the kiss is less about desire than about recognition, the feeling of finding something he hadn't known he was missing. When they part, she stays close, her cheek resting lightly against his shoulder. He feels her exhale there, a soft release that sounds almost like relief. For the first time that night, she doesn't seem like the composed hotel manager, she seems like a woman who has let down her walls. They move to the couch by the window, sitting side by side, still close enough that their hands remain intertwined. The city lights spill across the room, painting her in silver and shadow. She admits, in a voice barely above a whisper, that she hasn't let anyone this close in years. He listens quietly, squeezing her hand to remind her she doesn't need to apologize for honesty. The conversation drifts into quieter places, shared fragments of their lives, small truths that feel intimate simply because they are spoken here, in this room that no one else knows about. Every touch remains gentle, her head resting against his shoulder, his fingers brushing along hers, her hand occasionally resting against his knee. It is affection born not of urgency but of trust. The night doesn't end in grand declarations. Instead, it ends in stillness. She closes her eyes, leaning into him, and he wraps an arm carefully around her, holding her as though the simple act of closeness is enough. The wine glasses remain unfinished, the city hums beyond the window, and in the quiet he realizes this, whatever it is, doesn't need to be defined tonight. The keynote closes with him whispering into the hush of the room, "Then let this stay off the record." She smiles against his shoulder, and for once, she doesn't argue. If you want more stories like this, tales of forbidden attraction, age gap romance, and quiet moments that change everything, make sure to subscribe, like, and share this video. And let me know in the comments if you'd want me to tell the next story, because sometimes, the best chapters are the ones we haven't written yet.